Hello, everyone. Colin Larkin here. Welcome to another Imirt Inspire interview. Today I have Jordan Erica Weber. Welcome, Jordan. How are you?
I'm mostly fine. Thank you. I'm hurting a little bit down my left side because I fell down the stairs yesterday, but apart from that, I'm okay.
I saw on Twitter, yes, you fell down the stairs.
Yep,
Are
not as
you...
competent as I seem.
um, you could get a RoboCop arm installed if that one stops working with a gun
I
built
mean,
in.
I'm hoping it recovers, but sure, maybe.
So welcome to the interview. It's going to be very relaxed. I've already got someone, Retro Neo Games, saying hi, Jordan and Colin. Sound okay?
Hello.
Let me know if there's any sound issues like I had last month. And if anyone has questions for Jordan, just throw them into Twitch chat, and I'll ask Jordan as things come up. So I would like to start with just kind of a little bit about your background. Essentially, how did you end up in writing for games, particularly how you got into games and writing about them?
Gosh, okay. So I've always wanted to be a writer. I used to think that meant I wanted to write novels, but I realized pretty quickly that I don't have any imagination. So I decided that I wanted to be a journalist. I went to my careers advisor at university and she said, journalism is very difficult. Are you sure? It's very competitive. Have you considered doing marketing or something instead? So I went and got a different careers advisor. And she told me that I could either get a journalism qualification, which would cost money and time, or I could freelance and work part-time while I built up experience and then apply for a staff job. And I basically just, I graduated from university and I started working in Game Station just because
What
I've
is
worked
Game
in them
Station?
since I was, yeah.
Is that a shop? I just don't know.
Oh, yeah, okay. So Game Station, and it's owned by, it was owned by Game. It's now closed down. You know Game, right?
Yes,
The
yeah.
kind of
We
UK.
had Game here
Okay.
in Ireland too.
Okay.
So was Game Station a website for ran by Game or a magazine?
So no, it's Game Station was the shop still. So I've worked in games retail since I was 16. But that's what I was doing while I started freelancing, and then I was writing for like blogs and stuff. I had a classmate in university who ended up running a series of blogs, and she got me to write for her, and that was my first kind of published work.
Around when was
and
that?
So I graduated in 2011. Not 2011. Yes, 2011. And I immediately started writing for this blog. And my first paid published article went up the day that we found out that Game Station was going into administration and we were all losing our jobs. So it was
a
kind
seamless transition to freelance writing then.
Well, I mean, it took me a while to make most of my income from writing about video games. I was doing transcription and babysitting and making websites and things all at the same time. And I was very fortunate because I lived with a partner, so he was paying half the rent. So
Yeah, that's
it was much easier.
common. I mean, if you talk to indie devs, there's a litany of ways to get by, not that frequently from selling games. So now, would you say you're primarily games writing as your career?
I think I would say so. Just about. I think I make about. I had a look at my this is very boring, my tax spreadsheet recently, and I think about a half, just over half of my income comes from writing about games, and the rest comes from so television and talking at events and things, and giving lectures and stuff like that.
I want to get back to that actually. Talking at events, I've made a note here, but just to stick with writing about games, you write, or quite a lot of that is for The Guardian, but you basically freelance for kind of, I guess, anywhere you can make it work. I guess that's a question.
Yeah, I mean it started. I feel really bad because the places that kind of gave me a break, I don't write for a lot of them anymore because they can't pay very much.
Sure.
So you find this kind of uphill climb. You start writing for kind of some of the specialist magazines, Future Publishing and Imagine Publishing have all these magazines, and they were great to start out with. The editors were wonderful. I got really good feedback. But, you know, the page rates haven't really increased very much at all. And in fact, in some cases have gone down. So I kind of had to stop writing for most of those magazines.
That's
but
print
as I kind of
magazines?
built up experience. Sorry?
That's print?
Yes, print magazines.
Yeah.
So, you know, I used to write for Play magazine, Imagine Publishing, and Games TM, and they're great magazines and a great place to start. But they just can't pay very much because their budgets are so low. Because
They're kind
you
of
know,
very
Ricky
much
is in trouble.
threatened by the internet, I guess, their whole business. I mean,
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
surprised they're still here in a way, you know, if you think about where they were at 10 years ago.
Yeah, and I mean, it's kind of wonderful that they're still here. It feels like they're an important part of a lot of people's lives. I mean, I didn't really read many game magazines growing up, but I know a lot of my colleagues did, and that it was an important part of why they got into games and games writing.
Did you find it exciting the first time your article was in a real print magazine?
Oh yeah. Although I think actually before I started writing about games for print magazines, my first print article was for The Guardian, and it wasn't about video games. It was about there's a local charity in Leamington that got kicked out of their home, and I found out about it because I was going to co-working at the place where this charity called home, and I just kind of happened to hear about this, and I pitched it to The Guardian kind of on a whim, not thinking they would accept it, and they did. So my first published piece of work in print was nothing to do with video games.
And they didn't get kicked out because you were taking over the space, the co-working space.
No. They got kicked out because Leamington is full of luxury flats, and apparently we needed more gentrification. Although I guess Leamington's always been middle class, so not really gentrification.
So from then, I guess you do a lot of writing for, I guess, still The Guardian. Do you find yourself doing games and games reviews, or kind of other pieces like general research about games or thoughts?
I think it's kind of changed. I used to really, really like doing reviews because, you know, everyone likes doing reviews because you get a free copy of a game. And when you're freelance, you get to basically pick. I mean, you can't review anything you want, but you don't have to review things that you don't want to play because you're not a staff member, so you can just say no. So I enjoyed that because it was like, oh, this game's coming out next month. I'll pitch a review and then I'll get a free copy. And all I have to do is write, 800 words or whatever. But recently I've been enjoying doing more kind of investigative stuff and interviews. I really, really like interviewing people. So I've kind of moved more onto doing that kind of thing recently, although I still do reviews.
There's a huge amount of interest in kind of the craft of games and everything around games now, even games culture. So interviews must be a whole, like, I imagine something that people really want to hear.
I hope so. I don't really know what the kind of readership numbers are like between reviews and more kind of interview based stuff. I have a feeling that...
Do you get a feeling from how often you're kind of commissioned, and maybe that's the wrong word, people say yes to your pitches, to publish
I'll tell you
these?
something. At The Guardian, at least, reviews pay less than kind of longer form interview-led stuff. But I feel like, maybe depending on the game, I feel like reviews maybe get bigger numbers, but I'm not sure. I don't have access to them.
Yeah.
But it seems like people are more inclined, at least the kind of audience that you would think of when you think of who might be reading games press, it seems like they might be more inclined to look up a review than something a bit more niche, maybe, or...
They definitely search for reviews. Like, you won't just think up, I wonder if there's any interviews on such and such, and go looking. I mean, I guess you might if you're really heavily researching someone. But I would say if you're browsing a site, not particularly looking for information on a game, that kind of content is really interesting for people.
Yeah, I think maybe they just have a different audience.
And it's kind of more unique. When a given game comes out, say a really big one, every games publication in the world is going to review it. So there's going to be a lot of reviews. But if you go and find an interview, that's going to be very unique. I guess that's why, you know.
I didn't hear any of that question.
Oh, sorry,
I'm
was my
afraid.
internet spotty? Okay.
It cut out, yeah.
I'll start
sorry.
over. I'm just saying that an interview is like unique content. You're making something different from others. Reviews, you know, at the time a game comes out, there's lots of reviews for that game all over the place.
Yes, that's what I like about doing interview-led stuff, I think. The fact that you can write something completely different and that you can put your own spin on it and that you're finding stuff out that nobody else knows. The problem with like a lot of kind of games news and previews and reviews and stuff is a lot of sites are just churning out the same kind of material. Like, you know, everyone's got their own voice, and that's great. But I hate the kind of having to rush to get a review done so that you can get yours published at the same time as everybody else kind of thing.
On day one, basically. On launch day, usually. Yeah.
As soon as the embargo lifts, usually. The Guardian's a bit more lax about that, which I like. But yeah, I prefer being able to take my time.
And who's someone cool you've interviewed? I mean, what kind of personalities are you talking to? Game makers?
Mostly, yeah. I mean, my last interview-led piece was with Robert Yang about the Tea Room, his new game about. Do you know what?
Sexy.
Do you know what Tea Room? Yeah, yeah. So we call it cottaging in the UK.
Oh, and it used to be
used
to be tea rooms in parks, right? Is that why it's called tea room?
Yeah. So when men go to public bathrooms to find other men to have anonymous sex with. And Robert Yang made this game about it because he was reading this paper about it in the 60s when police were doing things like installing hidden cameras in public bathrooms so that they could catch men at it and then arrest them for, you know, consensual sex with other men, which is obviously awful. But he made a game about it, which I thought was really, really fascinating. And I was surprised that nobody else had really written about it.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of that, even though I've heard of pretty much all his other games. He really pushes the boundaries on what people are used to talking about. For example, he's had real trouble getting any of his games on Steam, maybe none of them.
Yes, I think he managed to release his games on Steam within the past kind of year or so, but he did seem to be having trouble, and Twitch has banned most of his games from being streamed. Sorry, Twitch. I know we're on Twitch right now.
It's okay. It's funny, yeah. You know, there's a thing where ultraviolence is kind of fine on, you know, TV or say Twitch, but anything, you know, vaguely sexy or controversial, yeah, it's a funny kind of strange ideal that only allows one sort of kind of violence.
There's actually a statement about that in his game, The Tea Room. He's changed the penises of the men to guns because he said Twitch will never ban guns. Yeah.
And for the gun lovers, that's a really good idea.
Yeah, no, it's great.
Okay.
It was a really good interview as well.
Well, hopefully we'll find a way to get you over to Ireland. You could kind of chat to some of the game makers here in the future at some point. That'd be cool. I want to talk to you about TV. So how did you find yourself end up talking about games on TV? How does that happen?
I'll be honest. The Gadget Show, I don't know if you know much about it, but there used to be a host called Jason on it who was, I think his name was Jason, who was very, very popular. He was on it for a very long time, and he used to occasionally talk about video games, but then he stopped working on the show. And I think they changed the format, and they decided to bring someone on to talk about video games. And they asked two of my colleagues at various publications, I'm not going to say who because I'm not sure if I'm allowed, but both of them recommended me instead. I presume the Gadget Show were like, who? But they emailed me, and I told them I could come in straight away for an interview because they are based in Birmingham and I live in Leamington. So I popped down to the studio the next day and had a chat with them, and they went away and thought about it.
A camera test? I mean, it's kind of different, isn't it?
No, I didn't. People always ask that. I think I've done
Had
a
you
few
done
on-camera things before.
like I know you've
Yeah.
done quite a bit of, public speaking and stuff. I've watched some of your talks before. Did you show them one of
Oh,
those?
fantastic. I think I did actually.
Okay,
I
because
sent
I
them
mean
a few
that
links.
would essentially show what you're like, talking to a camera, and
Mm.
like you probably wouldn't want to hire someone who's a reclusive writer and then like clams up when they're on camera, I presume.
No, I'm very lucky in that I think there's a stereotype in video games people that they're not very good at being on camera, but I seem to have a natural kind of affinity for it. I think because I grew up in a family of performers, so I'm quite used to, performing.
Just want to interject and go back to what we were talking about Tea Room, because in chat
Mm.
someone has come up with a really good name. Stantis
Okay.
says he should rename the game Gunwang, which is
Yeah,
quite
definitely.
clever. I like it.
It might not have had the same kind of the way I kind of sold it on the Guardian article was as this kind of important, artistic, cultural artifact, that people from outside of video games might be interested in.
They should experience
So I'm
it.
not sure if Gunwang would have the same kind of feel to it.
Okay, so how frequently are you working on the gadget show? Is that every week?
So yes, we aren't filming at the moment, but in the previous series, which I think was series 25, which shows you how long it's been going on for,
Wow.
I was on almost every episode, and it's on every Friday. And I've just been told, so some news for you, that I am coming back for the next series.
Congrats. That's great.
I literally just found out. Thank you.
And being on TV, has that led to other opportunities? I mean, is it visible in a special way? I always imagine TV as this massive, crazy, bigger thing.
I think so. So I've had a few kind of people pursuing me for opportunities that are television-esque, that I can't really talk about. But in general, I think people respect it in a way. Like I kind of already had this from working with The Guardian.
Yeah.
That people they hear that name and they want to help you because they're like, oh, my grandparents read The Guardian, or I read The Guardian. That's a respected publication. And with television, it's the same kind of thing, but maybe with a different group of people. I have a lot of new Twitter followers.
Did it like friends and family kind of, people who weren't all that into games? Were they kind of, no, you've got a real job?
I don't really have any friends and family who aren't into games.
Older
I've got
relatives,
my
maybe.
older
way to
I
think
don't
of
really
it.
have any older relatives. But I think so. I mean, I joined a choir that's made up of quite a few older people, and I think when they found out, thought it was quite impressive / funny maybe, and went and looked it up so they could watch it, and told me they didn't understand what I was talking about, but I think they were impressed nonetheless.
That's really cool. Do you think TV kind of is a good medium for games and talking about games, even say reviewing games or recommending games?
That is an interesting question. I think all mediums have their kind of positives and negatives, right? I was talking to someone the other day and telling them about a gaming podcast, and they were like, how do you do a gaming podcast? How can you talk about, do you just listen to people play the games? Like, they couldn't understand how that could be a thing. But, obviously gaming podcasts are incredibly popular.
Yeah.
And you don't have any visuals there at all. At least on television, you can show some visuals, but the problem with television is that, at least with the Gadget Show, we only got kind of 2 to 3 minutes per episode. And
Just a little kind of aside
I sometimes
about
felt like
games.
it wasn't long enough. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, kind of
talk about everything I wanted to.
there've been gaming shows kind of since the 90s. They never really spoke to me. They always seemed wrong. They weren't kind of, I don't know, they didn't really get the way games were going, or the way kind of everyone was becoming a gamer. It wasn't just for the hardcore few.
Did you ever watch
TV is really
Gainesville on
mass
Sky
market,
One?
so it was kind of weird. Say again?
Did you ever watch Gamesville on Sky One?
No.
I was on that when I was 11.
Cool.
So I've actually been on television talking about video games before.
That's cool.
But yeah, I know what you mean. Television does seem to struggle.
That it's a funny one because good video based content talking about games has now happened on the internet instead of TV, realistically, and that's kind of weird. They've kind of missed a beat there. The whole TV, if you think about the amount of content that's made for TV and is really big in mass market, it's kind of are games still not mass market enough for TV?
I think the problem with television can't copy YouTube, right? Because YouTube it's kind of instant, and television can never be. I mean, even for the Gadget Show, we film on a Tuesday and it goes live on the Friday, and so much can happen in 3 days.
Can
and
be slightly out of date sometimes.
Yeah, and there are instances where maybe there might be like a violent game that you want to talk about, and then something happens in the news in between filming and the show going live, and then you have to change the content because it's no longer considered appropriate with what's happening in the news.
You just talk about tea rooms instead.
Yeah, I don't think that's ever getting on the Gadget Show. I think the first episode we did, I talked about Mass Effect and getting naked with the aliens, but I think that's probably about as rude as it can get for 7:30 on a Friday.
It's quite late. That's okay. Most young kids are going to bed. What is after 9 when you can start getting?
Yeah. So YouTube's very different though, in that it's personality led, and there have been all these controversies with some YouTubers who've turned out to be not very nice people, but they're kind of like children's entertainers, aren't they? That's kind of the impression I get from a lot of YouTubers.
They're really big channels, almost all of them. But those kids are growing up as well. Channels now I'd say have been like 6 or 7 years, the really big ones. So those, 12-year-olds are now 18.
I don't know.
What do you think is going to happen there?
With YouTube?
YouTube versus TV.
Oh,
for games criticism.
There's no versus. I don't think neither one is going to kind of supplant the other. Hopefully, I think games will have a larger presence on television, but it'll be through things like, so Go 8-Bit is great on Dave, Ellie Gibson's show, and, esports.
Yeah, true. That's a whole avenue. That's a whole another side of gaming, actually, that has become huge for TV. Live sports, live esports matches, yeah.
But I mean, do people watch book reviews on television, or
that would be quite cool.
I guess film reviews? I mean, it would be cool, but it just doesn't, maybe it's not quite the right fit.
That's a really good comparison though. I mean, books have been big for quite a while and they haven't really broken into TV either. Good point. Okay. No, so maybe things just aren't for TV. They don't work the same way.
People go to the format that they're already on, right? Yeah. So people read book reviews because they're people who read, and people watch film reviews because they're people who watch things, and gamers watch Twitch because they're already on their computers and they're already online,
and it's full of live streaming of games, so you can watch people play as well as play yourself, which is a whole new thing. Just want to talk about freelancing for a second, because I have a good question here from Jazz Momo. Hi Jordan, love your work. Do you have any tips for dealing with burnout? With publications paying less, I definitely find myself taking on more work than ever, and I find that burnout is a big problem.
Yeah, it's tricky. It's really, really hard to make a decent amount of money just writing about video games. I think the way to the thing to aim for is to be writing for publications that pay more, and being able to spend more time on your work so that you're not if you're writing for a publication that can only pay £50 a page and you're having to write like 8 pages, just to make enough to keep going, that's not really sustainable.
You don't get to pick the font size, right?
No. Although I think sometimes these publications, they kind of decrease the amount of words per page to make it more savorable. But I don't know.
It's funny.
I think it's something to.
As a freelance writer for in journalism side of things, you're paid essentially per word. I mean, pretty much. So being clearer, you're not really being rewarded for that. I guess you're given, give me 6 pages about X, and you just fill up that amount.
Yeah, it's not like they say, I'll pay you this much per word, go and write as much as you want.
Yeah, okay.
Which would be great.
Do you?
No, they give you a word count, and you just kind of have to stick to it.
How scrutinized are you in terms of quality? Can you just bash something out and then they throw it on to be published, or is it someone carefully edits that and says, no, this is wrong, or you can do better? Or I mean, what's the process?
It varies widely from editor to editor. You want an editor who will come back to you with a detailed explanation of why your work isn't good enough. It's a hard thing to get used to hearing, but that's what you want. You don't want someone who just publishes your work, because you're not learning anything, especially if you're starting out. Sorry, I'm getting a thumbs. There's somebody else in the room, in case you hadn't picked up on that. In case you could hear, if you could hear typing, that's who that is.
Are they editing your response here, live editing?
No, I just got a thumbs up for saying that editors are good.
Okay.
So yes, editors are good, and you definitely want somebody who will give you honest feedback and will help you become better. Because editors who just publish and editors who just do the edits themselves and then publish, they might have to do that because they're short on time and under constraints themselves, but it's not really helping you as a writer.
It's just changing what you've kind of submitted.
And it's always a pain to read something that's completely different than what you sent in without knowing why.
I'll recut this interview for YouTube, make you say crazy stuff about guns and wangs. Okay, and freelancing as a lifestyle, I mean, it's kind of similar to what I do as a kind of work for myself, making games. So there's a lot of negatives there, like it's too easy to not leave the house on a given day, and you kind of don't have the rigorous work schedule and social side of work, an office of people that you can hang out with. I'm guessing it's the same for you.
It can be. I try to make sure I leave the house every day. I actually have like a very nerdy to-do list app thing that I use, and
one of them is leave the house.
One of them is go for a walk every day.
That's great. That's really good.
Yeah. But I also, when I'm doing the gadget show, that's in Birmingham, so I go to Birmingham on a Tuesday, and I'm doing these live streams with The Guardian, which are every Friday. So every Friday I'm popping down to London
for at their office.
At their office, and I pop in.
That's quite good already. You kind of have 2 days kind of at an office, at a workspace. Do you work from home otherwise, or do you use like a co-working space?
I used to co-work, but I mostly work from home now. My commute is a staircase.
Wow, that has its risks.
The one I fell down yesterday.
Maybe get the train next time. Okay, I want to talk about public speaking. So I've watched some of the talks you've given at, I think they're at London meetups. It's kind of casual. There was one where you were talking about a game you were enjoying where you had to matchmake.
Yes.
That was really interesting. Yeah. So that's just kind of a volunteer meetup with organized talks, right?
Yeah, so that's Video Brains,
Yes.
organized by Jake Tucker, with lots of help from Thrin. And yes, people do. So I think it's once a month in London. I think it's actually ending, sadly, but It's once a month in London, and about kind of 6 to 8 people give talks that they've pitched.
It's really, really
And it's
nice
a really,
idea.
really great way to, yeah, it's a good way to build experience in public speaking as well. And because they film all of the talks, it's been really useful for me to have as a kind of portfolio.
Yeah.
Because I've got 2 Video Brains talks and I can send them to people.
It's really handy, yeah.
Mm.
Have you, so you mentioned you managed to get paid for speaking as well?
Yes.
How do you manage that? Because that's kind of interesting. Conferences? Or
yeah, so
events?
conferences, universities, events. I am fortunate to know, kind of, that I've been doing this for 5 or so years now, and the longer you do things, the more people you know, right? So I know quite a lot of people who run events, and I've been recommended for things by, so my wonderful editor Keith at The Guardian. He gets asked to do a lot of stuff because he's been doing this for 20 years and he doesn't have time for it all, so he passes my name on a lot of the time, which is really, really useful for me. So that's how I've gotten a lot of my gigs. And yeah, I know people who run events and stuff. And then so I have a lot of universities now that I've spoken for them once and then they call me back the next year. I guess it's easier than looking for somebody new. Or they liked what I did, I guess. So I have kind of regular gigs, which is nice.
And they tend to pay. I guess they have a budget for that. Because, I mean,
Yes.
in my experience when I'm pitching for conferences, the absolute best I've ever managed is for, free tickets. I've never managed to get paid to speak at something.
I think it's difficult for a developer because the expectation is that you will do it for free because you're kind of publicizing your work.
Yeah.
Whereas I do this because I'm good at it, not because I have anything to sell. So if people want me to speak at their conference, I tend to demand payment.
That's cool.
Because, if they have me there, then their attendees are getting a good deal because I'm good at what I do. But I also don't have any game to sell, so I can't really get any other benefit out of it.
Yeah, it's kind of fair enough then. Exposure, good old exposure.
Yes, doesn't pay the rent, does it?
No. Okay. Here's another question from Jasmomo. I suppose this is a good question for both of us. Do you have any advice on getting interesting or headline-worthy quotes from interview subjects? My advice is bring up Wangs. Though actually,
with some
you brought them
developers,
up,
you don't have
which is
to
even
do
better.
that. They just, they do it themselves. Good advice for getting good quotes.
Or how'd you probe someone so you get something juicy? Get something.
I mean, the easiest way to get good quotes is to make sure the person you're interviewing is comfortable and, to be in a fortunate situation where you have plenty of time and you're just having a good chat. I spoke
free
to
to talk
Robert
as
Yang,
well.
Yeah, I mean,
if you're talking to essentially the people who can only kind of talk about the list of things they're allowed to talk about for a game.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot different when you're talking to an independent developer versus somebody from Microsoft who's got 3 PR people around them. I don't tend to do that kind of thing. Keith tends to get those jobs. So I'm quite lucky.
Yeah, I imagine that's very hard where you're trying to get something, but they're really just kind of, and now to read from my list, I guess it's never that bad.
I would say if you want to get quotes that other people don't have, try and think about the obvious questions that other people are asking and either avoid them entirely or try and frame them differently. Try and imagine what the interviewee is going to say. Don't just ask yes or no questions because they will just say yes or no and not give you anything else. Just kind of think it through a bit more. Do a bit of planning.
What about those questions where you phrase it in such a way that they're already agreeing with you or disagreeing, probably? Kind of putting
You mean leading questions?
Yes. Thank you.
I would say that is up to the individual whether they want to go down that route.
So that's kind of the more negative interview style, I would think. So this interview is framed as a chat. It's very casual. I don't pre-prepare questions in any horrible way. I make a tiny little map of kind of topics that I want to talk about. And I certainly don't try and trick anyone or push an agenda or get people to get angry or anything.
Yeah, you haven't got a particular thing that you're trying to trick me into
No,
saying.
exactly, yeah. Um, but Wang's was good. That's some good content there.
Apart from getting me to say the word wang, which, I'm pretty sure there are already videos of me on the internet saying wang.
It's a good word.
So, yeah, you could have already found that.
um, okay. Okay, so a lot of people that Imirt represents are game makers here in Ireland. And something that's quite scary when you're making your own games is how to reach the press or how to make something that's interesting. If you guys, say, at The Guardian or on the Gadget Show are looking at interesting games, I mean, how do you find them? And what do you think makes things stand out that makes you want to talk about them? Smaller games.
Smaller games. It's difficult because we don't often get to cover smaller games on either The Guardian or the Gadget Show. The Gadget Show is very much what's the biggest thing that's happened in the past week in video games. So I guess in that case, it would be find a week where nothing else is happening and release your game then.
Or cause a huge scandal. Has that ever worked?
Or cause a huge scandal.
do you ever talk about, probably not on the Gadget Show, but stuff like those developers who threatened Gabe Newell's life and got their game pulled off Steam? Just trying to think of really negative things that would seem like an awful idea, but still people will talk about you.
I don't think either The Guardian or the Gadget Show would cover that kind of thing, so I wouldn't recommend it. What would I recommend? I mean, the reason we wrote about Robert's game is because it was interesting, not just from a gaming point of view,
but from a cultural and even just the topic that he's addressing.
And obviously that's a big thing at The Guardian because we're obviously not a specialist gaming publication. So it's good to have things that kind of overlap in that way. We obviously write a lot about kind of cultural phenomenon like Pokemon Go. There was that month, last year when all anyone could write about was Pokemon Go.
Pokemon Go away.
Unfortunately, it does. Yeah, it does. It does rely a lot on kind of trends and what everyone is talking about, and there's no way to plan for that, unfortunately.
I think you wrote about an Irish game called Deep that a friend of mine worked on, Owen Harris. I think you wrote about for The Guardian, and that really helped his kind of reach massively at a time when he was just starting out. It's a meditative VR game where you can kind of control it by breathing.
So that's both something that's really, really different, so not like every other game out there, and also something that applies beyond just a gaming context. So that would be interesting to readers from outside of just the gaming section on The Guardian, which is why we covered it, I think.
And also, I guess,
I really like
part of the VR trend, so it kind of ticked every box.
VR doesn't actually do that well numbers wise on The Guardian. People aren't interested in reading about it, I don't think.
What about on the Gadget Show?
On the Gadget Show,
seems like it'd be quite
one VR
fun
episode
to show people falling over in VR.
Yes, I think for people like the Gadget Show, VR is still this kind of weird, funny niche that they will cover once until things change. VR hasn't reached a point where you would cover a different VR game on 2 episodes in a row. We just did one episode for the whole series where we just did VR and we spoke about VR games and we showed one. Craig Charles liked it a lot. He got very sweaty.
Which game?
Farpoint.
I don't know.
On the PlayStation VR. It's a shooter. I couldn't play it because it made me sick. You crash land on an alien planet and then things that look like spiders jump at you. It's not very pleasant.
Sounds relaxing.
I much prefer Deep.
Yeah, you could put in spiders into Deep. Just as
no. No.
See if you can control your breathing while spiders are jumping at you.
That sounds far too much like real life.
Someone's asking in chat here, did Erica ever get into Breath of the Wild? I saw you tweeting about that.
Oh, my long journey to enjoy Breath of the Wild. I have been playing it more lately.
How come? If you didn't enjoy it, what made you go back? Peer pressure?
Yes, absolutely peer pressure. the fact that everyone's been calling it a perfect game, and I was worried about my status as a believable video game critic if I didn't like it. I think that I have a maybe controversial opinion that I think people like it because they had to, because it was the only game on the Switch.
Yeah.
It's a high quality game, but it took me a very long time to have any fun. And I think people were maybe just playing it because there was nothing else to play, and they wanted to play their Switch because the Switch is great, and it's very pretty, so they convinced themselves they were having a good time. That's my theory.
I bought
and
the
now I've done it
Switch
too.
for Zelda, which quite a few people did, which essentially made the cost of this one game, hundreds of euro. So there's also the fact that when you buy something really expensive, you trick yourself into liking it so that you're not a fool.
Oh, yes, sunk cost fallacy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's...
So maybe we all spent so much money essentially on this one game. I mean, yes, we have a console for future games now, but that we overvalued it. I mean, I think it's a really nice game. I felt relaxed while I'm playing it. Like I didn't have to do anything. I kind of wandered around and did things at kind of my own
relaxed? There are monsters everywhere.
Yeah, but none of them are that scary. I mean, and the really scary ones, you can kind of, they're kind of cool. Like I haven't even gotten far enough to know why there's a giant dragon flying around the sky. I've kind of looked at it and then avoided going near it. I don't know if you saw that. In one part of the world, there's like a big kind of snake flying around in the sky.
My experience playing that game is going somewhere and being like, oh, I can't do this, or oh, I don't want to do this, and then leaving.
So
and that's my entire experience playing the game.
Have you played one of the newest Far Cry's, like Far Cry 3 or 4?
I think I played a bit of 3, but didn't get into it.
There's many games that kind of mimic that kind of open world idea of explore a map. In Far Cry, you climb up a big tower and it reveals more of the map and gives you a bunch of quests to do in that little area. Mm-hmm. Pretty similar to what you do in Zelda.
Yeah, except I watched this. I think Matt Lees did a video about Zelda and why it's different from those kinds of games, because you play a game like Far Cry or another Ubisoft game, you climb up the tower and then you get a million quests at once, right? You're like, here are the 50 things that I need to do in this region. Whereas in Zelda, you just get the map. You don't get quest markers. You have to kind of find those for yourself. So it's not like you get a to-do list straight away on Zelda. And
would you have preferred that?
I like to-do lists and being told what to do and having goals. So I think I just like linear games.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you sometimes. Like, I like to-do lists as well. But it was kind of a breath of fresh air there where they had this open world formula that they didn't stick to. It would have been much safer to do that. And they said, no, we'll make areas that are worth exploring because they look interesting rather than just keep giving you quests. And I kind of bought into it. I do like
that kind of artistic decision, yeah.
And I mean, I had a great time just wandering around and looking at things. And every time you see a kind of a funny rock formation, you're like, oh, I bet you there's a little leaf hidden in there. And almost always there is. And I really like that. There's this really small reward over and over for exploration.
The Koroks are great. I think maybe half of my problem is that I don't feel like I have time to just wander. And my days are so, full of things that I need to do that if I'm going to play a game, if I'm like, okay, I have an hour to play a game now, I want to know that I'm going to get something out of it and not just be like, I might spend an hour wandering around and not get anything done. Or I might spend an hour, going to a place and then there's a really big monster, like a blue-haired Lionel or whatever, and it just kills me in one go and all of my progress is gone. I'd like to know that I can... I think this is why I like games like Stardew Valley, because it's like I know what I need to do next. I know if I spend this much time playing it, I'll get all of these things done.
But it's also very freeform. Stardew Valley, you're kind of just do some farming,
but you're
not really told what
goals.
You need to do. I mean, you kind of make your own goals. I was doing that. I want a chicken coop and I'd work towards it, or I want to reach the end of the mine and I'd do that.
The difference is you can achieve them. in Zelda you might set your own goal, but then you can't achieve it. Like I came across a thing that I think is a Korok seed, and there's like 3 boulders and then a big hole in the ground, and it's kind of like a golf situation, I think, where you do that stasis thing and then you hit it with a very big stick. But I tried to do that for ages, and then a blue-haired Lionel came along with like 3,000 HP and just killed me. So I was like, well, I've just spent an hour doing this and I've achieved nothing.
Yeah, fair point.
It's just, I'm trying. I'm getting there.
It seems like you like it a bit more than you did before. Maybe it's Stockholm syndrome. You've spent enough time wandering around now that you're starting to not want to devalue your own time.
I think so. I think that might be it.
It is good to try it, since so many people talk about it. It's good to try and see why, for sure. I mean, that's definitely one of the reasons I was playing.
I think I'm going to write something about my difficult journey to love Zelda. So stay tuned for that.
Look forward to it. Jasmomo again, more questions. Thank you. Speaking of Far Cry, do you think Far Cry 5 will actually offer a smart cultural take on cults, etc.? So that is the one where it looks like it's set in the US, in the deep south in the US, and you will be essentially shooting militia, rebellious citizens, it looks like, of the US, rather than usually Far Cry puts you, pretty much shooting it kind of sounded New Zealandish in Far Cry 3. You're on some Pacific island, but, pretty clearly marked as foreign people generally, to kind of make it safer. There's been a big kind of outcry about that.
Well, I mean, to us, Americans are foreigners, right?
Yes.
But you're right, it doesn't have the same kind of feel to it. I'm not sure that Far Cry 5 will be particularly nuanced, but I'm not American, so I'm not sure I can have an opinion on whether it's an appropriate representation of the culture.
It's being made in Canada,
Far Cry
right?
Games, though. Is it?
I mean, if it's Ubisoft, maybe I'm confused about who makes Far Cry.
I mean, there are a million Ubisoft. We have a Ubisoft in Leamington. They're everywhere.
That's cool. What are they making?
I don't actually know. I should do. It's strange because most of the games companies here make car games. We have Playground Games, we have Codemasters. So we have Forza Horizon
very famous,
and Dirt. But I don't know what Ubisoft Leamington is working on. I should find out.
Retro Neo Games confirms made in Canada. Far Cry are Ubisoft, which is a large part in Canada. Maybe Far Cry 5 research is happening right now around the corner from you.
Maybe I should go and find out.
You could get a very interesting article there. What would Ubisoft make in your local town? I think you're right though. I don't see them making much of a statement with a Far Cry game.
No, I mean, Ubisoft is such a big company with such a big audience that I think they would just be terrified to actually make a political statement. They're going to insist that the game is politics free, I imagine.
They always say that. They always have a big warning at the start.
There's no such thing. No such thing. But
I mean, the original Assassin's Creed was kind of an interesting game for that. That they were kind of looking at a period in history. I mean, they've kind of, I don't think they do that anymore.
Sure, it's much easier to look at history though than to look at kind of the modern day and be like, oh, this is kind of like modern America, but slightly different. No politics, we promise. I don't know.
It's kind of there in Stardew Valley as well. That's set in modern day. Someone escaping from the city, forced to farm. I mean, that's pretty mean.
Well, there's the evil capitalist corporation in Stardew Valley who own the supermarket,
and you can join them. I didn't do it.
Or you can
I stuck
resist.
With the community hall.
Yeah. There's definitely a right and a wrong in Stardew Valley. They definitely have a political opinion there.
Okay. Anyone got any more questions for Jordan? I think I've covered everything I want to talk about.
Are you sure?
We can go back to Wang's.
Didn't you want to ask about the book?
Yes, sorry. No, how wrong I am. Well, you can't see this, but I'm holding up my little thing and pointing at where it says book underlined. Okay, sorry. Yes, you've written a book, which is very exciting.
Here it is.
And
It's
it's
much
about
bigger than I thought it was going to be.
philosophy and video games, correct?
Yes. So
How did this happen?
Dan Grill and I. So he studied philosophy at Oxford. I studied at Warwick. We were both at the same party about 5 years ago. No, can it have been 5 years ago? 4 years ago? A long time ago. And he casually mentioned that he would one day like to write a book about philosophy and video games. And I said, I've always wanted to write a book about philosophy and video games. And then we decided to write one together, which is fortuitous because I studied completely different subjects than he did. He did kind of ethics and I did no ethics because I actually studied philosophy and psychology. So I skipped all the ethics parts. And yeah, we found a publisher who
Who's
published.
the publisher?
He published. So it's Little Brown. So ours is, I think, Robinson, who is part of Little Brown. And we met the publisher at the book launch for Rich Stanton's book, Brief History of Video Games, which is published by the same people. And I just approached him at this party and said, I've got a book idea, knowing full well that he must get that constantly. And he just happened to be.
But you had the idea
interested.
already? I mean, you said it's about this.
Yeah, I just said, we've got this idea about how video games can help us to explore basic philosophical ideas. I'd written, I think, 1 or 2 articles about it before, which I probably sent him. And then we sent him kind of a longer pitch and he took it. We went in for a meeting. We kind of hashed out the details. He asked us to write it in 9 months. I said, could we please have a year? We were late. But it got done finally, and it's coming out next month.
That's super cool. I just put the link into Twitch chat there to Amazon.
Thank you.
That's quite exciting. Do you feel like a real writer, like to have an actual physical book?
No.
I mean, it feels like it might be the equivalent of if you're a game maker having, like a PlayStation boxed version of your game.
Oh, is that still the standard?
I've never done that, so I imagine that's quite exciting.
I was very excited when the first one came in the post, which is this one, and then I got a box with 10 in it, and it kind of stopped feeling real.
At least
I don't
you're
know.
not
It's a weird feeling.
Self-publishing, because then you'd have a whole room full of them.
Oh god, that'd be horrible. I don't know what I'm going to do with these 10. I'll have to give them out as prizes or something. Yeah. But no, it hasn't quite sunk in yet. I think maybe when I see it in a shop. Maybe.
Yes, yeah, that'll be exciting. Are they doing a launch and you're gonna sign copies?
I don't know.
Or is it all
online?
How does books even work these days?
I want to have a launch. Everyone else I know who's been published by them has had a launch, but they haven't said anything. So maybe I'll go and ask
maybe
them.
poke them about it.
I'll have one in Leamington and make everyone come here. Nobody will come. It'll be empty.
Ubisoft can host you.
Yes. 1 copy for each employee of Ubisoft Leamington.
Maybe it's a tax haven.
Maybe.
There's got to be some reason.
Leamington's a great town. It's a wonderful town. I think
Maybe
there are about
that's it. Maybe there's
2,000 people
someone really
who
important
hate
in Ubisoft wants to live in Leamington. So they have an office there for them.
I think they bought what used to be Freestyle Games and turned it into Ubisoft
That
Leamington.
actually makes the most sense. That's what happened. They inherited the studio and kept the studio there. Yeah.
I think so.
That's not as exciting as I thought it would be.
I'm sorry. Leamington is a great place and everyone should visit.
So I guess it's too early to know, but would you write another book?
No.
Never?
No.
Is it
No,
way
it's
harder than you
horrible.
thought?
It was I ran out of money entirely because, we got an advance, but it wasn't very much, and I had to do it alongside my other work, and it was very stressful, very, very emotionally difficult, and now that I've done it, I feel like I can tick it off my list and never do it again.
Hmm.
So
Let's
if
see
you want to
though.
get a book written by me, this is the one you have to
This is
buy.
the one to go for. Okay. Desmomo, who asked a whole lot of questions, is suggesting you do a Twitter giveaway of signed copies. That could certainly get you rid of 10.
Maybe. I'd prefer everyone to pre-order it.
Yes, that's better. Do the
Pre-order my
Twitter
book, and
giveaway
if you
later.
bump into me somewhere, I will sign it.
Okay, cool. I'm not going to keep you any longer. I'm glad you brought up the book because I would have regretted not getting to talk about that. Thank you. I'm
you.
very glad we got to talk about Wangs. We can maybe bring that in with all our future interviewees. Thanks so much for giving up your time. You can get back to writing books. And if you find yourself in Ireland for any reason, for work, or if we can find a way to invite you, if we manage to put together a conference or anything, I'll be in touch. Or if you find you're here for other work, get in touch with me and I'll bring you along to one of our meetups. It'd be great to get you to meet some of the games makers here. There could be a few more deeps for you to discover. Thanks everyone. As usual, we will put this up on YouTube in future. Thanks so much, Jordan.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right. Bye.